Good morning. Welcome back to the homestead. Yesterday I had to mix up a batch of seed starting mix, and I thought that you guys might like to see how we make our seed starting mix here on the homestead. We make ours in bulk instead of buying it in small bags. The primary components of our seed starting mix is Coir, Perlite, or Vermiculite, or a combination of the two, and a little bit of our own compost. The Coir is an excellent, it's essentially the outside of the coconut. So the hairy part or the outside of the coconut that you see that it's been processed down. It makes a really great light material that is really good at water retention. It has a really natural pH. It's the loomy part of our seed starting mix. The other two items are your perlite and your vermiculite, which kind of do the same thing. They're both very porous materials. They absorb the water and oxygen, and they have a slow release for it. So they keep the soil from compacting. They help in releasing that water in a slower material. I kind of like the vermiculite a little bit better to work with. The perlite has a dust to it. Perlite is essentially, it is volcanic glass that is superheated until it pops. Think like popcorn when it pops and now you have this like airy outside the white part of the popcorn. That is essentially what's going on with perlite, but it's volcanic glass. So there's a dust that's involved with that, which, if you can guess, is not good to inhale. So you have to be really careful when you're working with perlite. Vermiculite, to me, doesn't have any of that. Vermiculite, let me look at my notes so I don't mess up. It's a chemically inert material. It is neutral to both alkaline and acidics. There's a small amount of trace elements in it. Calcium, magnesium, potassium, iron, aluminum, and silicon, which are all great trace minerals for your seed starting, for your seeds to start off in. The other thing that we use is we sift a small amount of our compost that we make here at the homestead. And we sift it so that it's really, really fine, keeping all of the big particles out of it. You don't want anything big and bulky that's heavy in your seed starting mix, because when your seed germinates and those roots come out, they're pretty delicate at first, depending on which seed you're using, but most of them are kind of delicate, and you don't want them to run into hard walls. You want this stuff to be very easy to move through for your roots to really get that good root system going for you to be able to transplant. That's part of the reason why we like to use some of our own compost, is that's what those are going to get planted into as soon as they're ready, whether it be in one of our containers or whether it be directly into the ground in the big garden. That's what they're going to be exposed to. So we like to expose them to a little bit of that at our starting point. We want strong seeds. So if our compost isn't going to cooperate with them, we'd rather know it now when we're starting seeds at germination, because we can put more seeds. We can start some more seeds and have more if they don't germinate. So we want to think strong will survive here on the homestead. But I'm going to come up close and kind of give you an up close view of those components and how we do the sift. Brent made me a very cool sift that took him all of 5 minutes. It would have taken me 5 hours to make. Took him all of 5 minutes to make it for me, and it fits perfectly. You guys are going to like the fact that those buckets that we constantly talk about that we recycle and we use for container garden, and we use it for tree watering. I also use it to sift compost. It works really, really well. But we'll get in close to that, and I'll kind of show you some of the components up close, what they look like. The other item, that is oftentimes found in a seed starter is peat moss, which is also another loomy material. And it looks very similar to me. It looks very similar, and it feels very similar to the Coir. But peat moss comes from peat bogs, and it's a little less renewable. It takes a long time for peat moss and peat bogs to produce this stuff. It's not something that is as easy to renew as your coco coir. And for that reason, usually you can get coco coir at a much more reasonable price. And I like the way it works. So, but let me get you guys in here a little bit closer, and I will show you what all of these look like. So this is the coco coir fiber in this bucket right here. I'm going to try to get in here. This might be a little shaky, guys. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm trying to film it one-handed. So you can see it's very, very light. It doesn't really, like you see, it's still got a little bit of moisture from where I expanded it, but like it doesn't, like there's nothing to hold this together. This is very, 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 very loose, very, very fibrous. Whereas here's the peat moss. And I just bought a small bag of it, but you can kind of see this peat moss has a little bit of plant food in it. I couldn't find any without it at the big box store. But you can see kind of the same thing. This one's a little bit drier than mine currently, but very, very loose. Either one of these are great for your loamy material in your seed starting mix. The next item here is the Vermiculite. I got this at the same place I get my coco coir, which is a local nursery. And I'm going to touch this, but you really probably shouldn't touch this with your bare hands. But I want to see if y'all can see up close. I don't know if it'll get it. But it almost looks like little fossils. It kind of has that little crinkly area. It's very, very porous. This holds your moisture. It also holds air. It keeps the soil aerated. Then you've got the perlite, which, remember, perlite is your expanded volcanic glass. So I really don't want to touch this with my hand, but I want y'all to see. If y'all can see what that looks like. And you see this a lot in your seed starting mix, and a lot of your potting soils have this. It almost feels soft. It almost feels like popcorn. But if you watch, like, let me see if I can, bear with me just a second here, guys. If I can pour this where you guys can see it, you'll see how dusty it is. Yeah, I don't think y'all are going to be able to see it. You'll have to take my word for it. Ooh, there you go. You see that? Did y'all see how that pops up? And you don't want to breathe that in. That is very, very not good for your lungs. The other thing that I have here on the table is I got this on clearance at the at TSE yesterday. Originally $6.99 for, I think it's 12 quarts. Yeah, 12 quarts. Organic seed starting mix, and I wanted to show y'all what it looked like compared to what mine looks like. Let's see. I'll just throw a handful here on the table. So it's on clearance for $5.99. It's not bad. It has a little bit of plant food in it too, so they've added some nutrients. But to me, it doesn't have near as much of the perlite or vermiculite in it. And I want to say that the back of this, it only has perlite in it. So yeah, and then back over here, this is my container that I use to hold when I make a big batch of seed starting mix. And I used about 1/3 of that bale of coco coir. And this is it all mixed up. You can see very, very light. very fluffy. Now bear with me just a second. I'm going to get the sift set up and I'll get y'all in to see how that works. So this is the sift that Brent made me in all of 5 minutes, but it's perfect. It's got some nice handles, fits perfectly over these buckets that we were talking about. So real quick, I wanted to mention that block of cocoa coir that you saw, when it's full, it says that it will fill this 30-gallon tub. So I used a third of it, and it filled up that tote very, very well. But yeah, picture that. So when you're looking at those bricks, the expansion rate, once you add a little bit of moisture to them and let them kind of fluff up, it's pretty extreme. So on our compost, I'm going to take a couple shovelfuls here and just put it right on top. And you'll see that it's kind of surprising because our compost doesn't look like it has a lot of really big material in it, but when you put it through this sieve, you really start to see that you have more in there than you thought. So it's pretty much just like, look at that. Hopefully y'all can see that. And some of it's clumped up, so if you come through here and break it up, that's what this screen is for. But look, there's a rock. I never even saw it in there. Let's do one more. There's a couple more rocks. Piece of string. So now what we are left with is a very fine, loose material. It's perfect for me to mix into our seed starting mix. So real quick, while I have these buckets and I have this, I'm going to go ahead and mix up just a little more batch. I figured y'all might like to see that. I kind of base my water retention or my vermiculite, perlite on how much cocoa coir I took off of the block. Just because you're breaking that, you're not necessarily going to get exactly a third off of it. Like I think I got a little bit more than a third, so I have a little bit extra. So I kind of go by look, and then you can kind of visually see. So this bucket is about, it's filled to about here with the cocoa coir. So I'm just going to add this in here. Give me 1 second, let me grab my gloves. And my shovel. It's one thing I will tell you, ladies, on the Homestead, Brent has gloves everywhere, and they're great, and they fit my hands, but I have smaller hands. Us ladies, we got smaller hands. Invest in a really good pair of work gloves that fit you. I paid way more than I should have for a pair of leather work gloves, but they actually fit my hands. And having a pair of gloves that are nice and heavy duty, that aren't like kid gloves for smaller hands, is invaluable on the Homestead. So take that for what it's worth. It's a little piece of information or a little tip or trick from me on the Homestead. Having a good pair of work gloves that fit your hands is important. So I'm not going to use all of that compost that I sifted. This is way more than I need. So I'm just going to scrape some off the top. Like I said, you don't want a whole lot. You just want a little bit. Some nutrients. So I don't know, I probably scraped off a third of it, which is more than enough. And then I'm going to put, this is probably 2/3 of this bucket is full of the perlite and the vermiculite. Now, you see that dust? That's that perlite. You want to be very, very careful. You do not want to inhale that dust. It is basically glass, and we don't want to do that. So once it gets a little bit wet, the dust, and there's enough moisture in that cocoa coir that it should kind of calm down that dust here. There we go. And here we go, using those tubs again as a mixing bucket. We use these tubs so much. Get with your local farmers, your ranchers that feed these tubs to their cows. Ask them about them. These are waste and litter on their holding pens and in their fields. They would be more than helpful. Sorry. They'd be more than gladly give you these to get them out of their way. We're just mixing this up really, really well. And it's that simple. Now, when I'm doing a big batch of seed starter, I do mix a little at a time. So I might throw in all of my vermiculite, perlite, and my compost at one point in there, and then I add the cocoa coir, and I add the cocoa coir or the peat moss, whichever one you prefer. And I mix it a little bit at a time, just because when you get a large bucket, to me it's a little bit easier if I do it a little bit at a time. So this is really mixed up, but I can look at this and tell that I messed up. So I have way too much compost in here. I can see too much of the compost. I shouldn't be able to see that compost in here. If I show you this compared to, I'll show you a side-by-side of this versus the seed starting mix that I mixed up yesterday afternoon, and you can see it in here. There's way too much. So because I bought that bag of peat moss to show y'all the difference between the cocoa coir and the peat moss, I'm going to mix some of that peat moss in here just so that this doesn't go to waste. That's how you do it on a homestead. You make things work. Nothing goes to waste. So it looks like the vermiculite and the perlite looks good in here. Or it will look good in here when I get a little bit more of my Lumi material in here. But right now there's too much compost in here. So that's what I'm going to do right now. Thank you guys. Hopefully you found this video helpful. Like, subscribe. If you have any questions, comments, you want to know where I got all this, I'm getting ready to plant fall garden stuff, so that'll be coming up shortly. I'll show y'all what we're going to try to put in the fall garden. I'm raring to go, but it's a little bit too early. We're middle of August right now, so I really need to wait just a little bit longer so that these cooler weathered plants don't have to put up with this Texas heat that we still have. But yes, leave a like, follow, ring the bell for notifications, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.